What is the biggest coincidence you have ever experienced? I was living in CA. My best friend lives near Portland. We both got out of our car at the same cafe at the same time, 250 miles from his house and 700 miles from mine. At first we were both like hi, then we realized that we weren't meeting each other there and it was a massive coincidence. Met a guy at a brewery in California. We both grew up in the same city. Had the same job. Had the same connecting flight. And had the same name. Were you looking in a mirror? My wife and I got married in 1990. It was quite a small wedding. Just family and close friends I saw, including my wife's former history teacher, retired. In 1994 we went for lunch at history teacher's house. He had some local books about our county during D-Day preparations, June 1944, in which I showed interest. He said I could borrow them if I wanted to. I said no thanks, cause my mum had told me her recollections of D-Day from when she was a child and lived in a small forest village in southern England. He asked me what village, and it turns out he was accoutted there as a child at the start of World War II. We found out he was my mum's next door neighbor in the 1940s in this small village and had a crush on one of my mum's older sisters at the time. The sad thing is that he and that particular aunt were both at my wedding in 50 years later. In 1990, but no one knew of the connection. I changed jobs and knew if I didn't change my number, employees at the old job would call me whenever they needed help. Like a year later, at my new job, a new girl hears my less than common name and says, "Is there any chance you used to have the phone number XXXXXXXXXX?" Full stop. I'm like, oh, yeah. She says she gets like 5 calls a week of people asking for me. Back in the 80s, when I was in college, my roommate and I are sitting in our apartment, listening to an album by The Police, you know, that band Sting used to be in. Our neighbor from 2 doors down knocks on our door, and I open it. He gets a weird look on his face. He asks me to step outside. The guy who lived in the apartment between us had his door open. We could hear the same Police album. Same song. At the same point in the song. The album? Synchronicity. Of course. Snowboarding. I've pissed on the wrong side of a mountain located about 500 kilometers from my hometown. We end up on a small road in the middle of nowhere and have to walk 2 kilometers back to the lifts and civilization. The only car we meet on this road was my art teacher honking and waving. 15 years ago, and I can still remember the what? The FCK moment my friend and I had. The bastard didn't even give us a lift. Wore a Dota 2 shirt to a convention. Random artist says he does Dota commissions as I walk by. Strike up a conversation about Dota heroes. Mention my friend Mike plays Juggernaut a lot. He also has a friend named Mike he met at college who played a lot of Juggernaut. It turns out the random artist who decided to talk to me is someone I had been playing Dota with for months but never met in person. When I broke the screen on my phone when I was in secondary school, about 12 years ago, I took it to this little independent phone shop to fix it. The guy fixed it perfectly, but unbeknownst to me he stole my SD card. Being an awkward teenager, I didn't want to confront him. Also, I didn't really need the SD card, so I went about with my life. Couple of months later I got an SD card in my Christmas stocking. And my dad explained he got it from the shop. It was my old one with all my photos and videos still on it. It also still had my collection of PRN still on it. When I was in college, this really stupid joke spread like wildfire in my dorm. Do you know that whenever there's an awkward silence, someone thinks about Abraham Lincoln? Really? No. But now you will. The next week, I went to a religious conference in a different city. I was making small talk with some new acquaintances, and the conversation ran its course, leaving us in an awkward silence. Of course I remember that dumb joke. And at that very moment, from across a very large and rather crowded room, I lock eyes with an Abraham Lincoln impersonator. And no, There was absolutely no reason for someone dressed as Abraham Lincoln to be there. And yes, he was unmistakably supposed to be Abraham Lincoln. From the stovepipe hat to the beard to the old Timmy clothes. I lost my ID. And it was returned to me in person by a stranger at a party in a different city a few days later. We both happened to have some mutual friends there and he recognized me from my picture. My girlfriend from high school in Ohio walked up and said hello to me. Completely out of the blue. 8 years later. On the street. In San Jose. Flying back to Florida from Tanzania with a layover in New York. I had to open my suitcase as I went through security. On top of the clothing pile was one of my shoes instead of two. I took everything out of my suitcase looking for the other shoe. It was nowhere to be found. I haphazardly put my stuff back into the suitcase. Resigned to the fact that I would have to discard the lone shoe. When I arrived at home and opened my suitcase. Right on top of the pile of my clothes. Side by side. Were both of my shoes. Lost my ID in a jacket once. 3 people looked over all of the various pockets and compartments of my jacket and didn't find my ID. 6 months later I put the jacket on and checked the pockets. My ID was there. My connecting flight was delayed. So I found another flight. That one was supposed to take off 2 hours ago. But a delay allowed me to catch it. Once I got to my seat, my ex-boyfriend, who lived in another state and I haven't seen in 8 years, was seated next to me. Very awkward flight. I was on a backpacking trip and I came across a couple of people doing a horsepacking trip in the backcountry. I stopped to chat with them for a minute and realized that one of them had been my best friend in junior high until her family moved away. We were multiple states away from where we grew up and in the middle of nowhere. And this was decades after we lost touch. It was a little surreal. In high school I walked into class. Saw one of my friends. Snapped both fingers and did a double trigger finger point at her while making a popping noise with my mouth. She also did the exact same series of motions to me at the exact same time. It was like it was our secret handshake or something, except I had never done that before. Nor saw anyone do it. Nor know why I felt compelled to do it. But it happened. A friend and I have for years routinely had similar aches, pains, injuries that one of us can't account for how we achieved them. These include examples of from mutual friends of ours seeing or hearing us comment on an injury, then seeing or hearing the other comment on similar injury around the same time, all in last month or so. Most recently I gave blood. She had what looked like a big bite on her arm. She gets horribly sick. I felt woozy. I get a huge bruise on my ribs from longsword fencing. She gets large mysterious bruise on her ribs. She hits her shin on a coffee table. I comment to my girlfriend that wow, my shin hurts. I hurt my finger falling. She called me to ask me if I had hurt her because her finger had started hurting badly. Edit. As a kid I had this imaginary friend named Kelly that I would talk about all the time. I come home from my first day of kindergarten and my mom asks me if I made any friends. I start telling her about this girl named Kelly and of course my mom assumes it's this imaginary friend. Nope. She finds out my friend at school is really named Kelly and we had never met before. The kicker was we found out we had the exact same birthday. We were born about 12 hours apart in the same hospital. My best friend and I were about to board a flight home from Florida and she told me she heard someone say my name. Which is very uncommon. So I thought she was kidding. Nope. Turns a kid from my homeroom who is also her next door neighbor was on the same plane. I met my wife the year before I met my wife. Running into somebody at a local gas station that was commenting on my Reddit thread. I was in the psych ward a couple times when I was younger. The first time I was there I made friends with a girl named Bethany. A few years pass and I end up in the psych ward again. Bethany was there. She arrived the day before. Was looking through a photo album at my then new girlfriend's parents' house. Came across a photo of her dated the exact same day I was born. She's 3 years older. Not one other photo in the entire album had a date on it. That was neat. We've been together 23 years. Married for 19. Many years ago I went on a night out with a friend and on the way we stopped off to pick up one of his other friends. We hung around in his lounge while we waited for him to get ready and his wife was watching the newly released Terminator on VHS. Fast forward to about 15 years ago and I went to view a house that I was interested in buying. I got a feeling of deja vu and it took me a while to realize that it was the same house we had picked the guy up from all those years ago. I ended up buying the place. I still live here today, and on the day we moved in I got the TV set up and switched it on to find the Terminator playing from the same point when we left for our night out. I remember the part because it was the SX scene and we all waited for it to finish before we left. Worked next this person at a small dental lab for about 2 years. Got along great even though the job was crappy. She got let go. Then me about a year later. 5 years pass and I'm at this much better company. One day they tell me I have a new co-worker and they'll be right next to me. It was the same person. I was living in London and my best friend came over to visit me from the small town I am from in Canada. We were sitting in a pub and lo and behold, in walks a guy from our childhood soccer team in Canada. We ended up having drinks with him. Still blows my mind. I met this girl at a party and asked for her phone number. This was about 30 years ago. She gave it to me and I thought she was joking around because her number was just one number different from mine. My mother didn't know I was dating Gil. Mum accidentally dialed the wrong number, Jill's, and asked to speak to me. I was there. At the other end of her wrong number. I moved to a new school my junior year and when I was walking the halls to get to my next class I bumped into my biology teacher from the previous year. We both moved to the same school but for different reasons. Different reasons. Yeah. This blows my mind every time I think of it. One day last year I got up to use the bathroom around 2 AM. I walked into the bathroom and flipped the light on. As I flipped the switch all the power in the house went out. Instantly thought I tripped the breaker so I made my way down to the basement to find that all the breakers were fine. I went back upstairs and woke my wife up to tell her we had lost power. As I sat there wondering why it was out, my wife informed me that all the street lights were out too. Lo and behold. We later found out that there was an accident at 2 AM where a car hit an electrical pole and knocked out power to our entire neighborhood. In other words, literally the exact second I flipped the switch to turn the light on in the bathroom was the exact second the car crashed knocking out the power. Seriously. What are the odds? Lost her wallet with $400 bucks in it. Tore the house apart. Accused my mom of throwing it away when she was cleaning the table. A valid assumption she had a habit of just sweeping everything in a trash bag without looking. Spent 2 weeks looking for that thing and it was gone. Got everything replaced. Car's ID. SSN card etc. Year later my first car that I just got up and running stator or power steering brakes can't remember which both ended up being a frequent problem with that car. Anyways I went broke getting it up and running the first time. I'm laying on the floor in defeat. Looking at the shelf next to the table. And there is my wallet. What you couldn't see unless you emptied it and lifted up was there was this little shelf made by the feet. Somehow my wallet had ended up on one of those shelves so no matter how much you slid it around you'd never find it. Cost of the parts after tax $398.07 or some shitty like that. I got $1 and some change back. Found the wallet a year to the day it was lost. Probably when I was on holiday with my parents and we stopped at a petrol station in the middle of France somewhere, about 1,000 kilometers from home. And 2 rows over there was my best friend with her parents. If you were best friends wouldn't you have known she was in France? First week of college. Recently my buddy and I have had conversations where I've said the exact word he was reading as he was reading M. And these were odd words. Not ands and ors. Like I say the phrase millennial shift as he happens to be reading it. We are not in the same room. When I was a kid, my family went on vacation to Maine 400 miles from home. We were getting on a party boat, fishing, and directly across from us on another boat was a family from our town. We each waved at each other in disbelief. At the live show of a local singing competition, my mom's friend told me that I already have a man in my life. I asked my mom's friend what he meant, but he didn't explain further. At that time I had someone I like and I just assumed that the prediction was about him. Then a few months later, the guy I liked, who's also my friend, set up a coffee shop business. It was in this coffee shop where I met my current so. Later on I found out that my so was also there at the show where I got my fortune told by my mom's friend. I'm not superstitious. I am a little stitious though. Saw a girl at a party I thought was cute. I finally got the balls to talk to her, and after about 5 minutes, we figured out we had the same exact birthday. She later gave me head in the bathroom because of it.